Hey guys, today let's animate firing a pistol. The first thing we want to do is take a look at some reference so we know how it's supposed to look. If I scrub through this footage, the first thing that happens is the gun pitches upwards. Then that's followed by a little bit of translation upwards and backwards with the recoil, while the gun pitches back down to level out. First thing I like to do is on frame 1 to have a little bit of anticipation. Depends on how well trained your soldier is. If they're a little bit less trained, they'll have more anticipation because they're expecting the fire to happen. But if they're really well trained, then they know just to gently squeeze the trigger and not anticipate too much. So I'm just translating the gun a little bit, pitching it downwards, just for a tiny bit of anticipation. Then frame 2 is going to be our main recoil frame, which is where we're pitching the gun upwards, and then let's also translate it backwards a little bit and up just a tiny bit. But the pitch is going to be most of it, and then for a little bit of extra detail and pushing the pose, we're going to roll it a little and maybe give it some yaw, and translate it to the right a little bit as well. So that's going to be our firing frame, and then a few frames later we'll do the translation upwards and pitching back down to level it out. We'll fix the roll as well, and we'll probably try bringing the translation backwards a little bit more before settling it forwards a little bit later. So this is how it's looking. So you can see we have that kick happening and then the recovery start with the translation and then the pitch leveling out. Then let's copy our frame 0, put it at something like frame 20, and then over here we can do the settle. So I would probably bring the translation down a bit, the pitch down, and then the translation forwards. And the translation on the x-axis as well to settle down. So we'll do a lot of the polish in the graph editor, but this is kind of our super basic fire animation just from a few keyframes. Now in the graph editor, I think I want to touch the y-axis first, which is our up and down translation. I'm going to bring the translation down for this anticipation frame, just ever so slightly. And then we've got the kick, which doesn't need too much of a change. Upwards I think is pretty good. I don't want it to stay in the air for too long, so we'll bring that backwards. There we go. And then we'll give it a little bit of an overshoot here. And we can probably add another keyframe at the end so that we can add a little bit more settle in all of our channels. X-axis now. I don't want to overdo the x-axis. We'll bring it back, maybe soften it out a little bit. Maybe we'll give it a tiny overshoot just at the end. Cool, and now the Z axis. Yeah, it's going to move a little bit forwards in anticipation of the fire, and then the kick is going to be backwards, maybe not too much for the first frame, and then continue moving backwards during the translation. And then this might take some fiddling. I do like having a bit of texture by angling the tangent like this sometimes. It just depends on how things are shaping up. Let's give it a bit of forward overshoot. And that's feeling a little bit too slow, so we'll bring that forwards a bit. Okay, not bad. I might remove that angled tangent just a little bit, soften that. Now let's do the rotation, which is where a lot of our feel is going to come from. So the x-axis for me is my pitch. The downwards is pretty good. And I'm liking how high that goes. I might give it a tiny bit of overshoot from this pose, just so it raises up ever so slightly more. Maybe not. Just a little bit of easing down. Yeah. And then level out maybe a little bit faster, and with a bit of texture as well, just so that it goes down and then has a little bit of variance in the downwards motion. And I think I want to overshoot up a little bit here. We can move the keyframes around a little bit as well, so everything's not on the same exact frame. Get a little bit of overshoot happening. And let's actually try move this leveling out earlier. Yeah, I'm liking how that's feeling. Then the y-axis is going to be my yaw. I think I want to yaw the other way possibly. and the anticipation. And then this we can make a little bit more extreme. It's always good to go a bit more extreme for single frame impacts like this kick here, just because it'll be easier to read in motion. And then we're going to overshoot, but not too drastically, because we don't want it to feel like it's swinging all over the place. Yeah, see, it's swinging a little bit too much, so we want to soften this a little bit. We don't want to feel like it's going left and right, left and right. Cool, liking how that's looking. Finally, our roll, which is going to be where a lot of detail comes from. I think I want to keep it rolling this way. That's maybe a bit too intense. Okay, big roll, and I think I want to overshoot really fast over just a couple frames and then bring it back. We're just animating at 30 FPS, so it's okay if we push the rotations to be a little more extreme than we might expect. So that's feeling nice and punchy, nice and visceral. I quite like that. Obviously this is just the overall motion. We do need to animate the slide, the hammer, and if we want, we can animate the trigger and the finger as well. That's not super necessary because it's not really visible. We can also animate the camera as well. So let's start with the slide. On frame 1 it's going to stay the same because the hammer hasn't hit yet. Then frame 2 we're going to bring it back. I have no idea how far back the slide will move for this gun, but we'll guess roughly there. And then we'll copy frame 0, let's say 2 frames forwards so that it's nice and punchy to return. Something like that. Then the hammer is going to hit on the first frame, and then the slide is going to bring it back. So we'll copy this frame and we'll put it on frame 3. We'll see how that looks slowed down. Maybe it'll work out. The trigger, this might as well just key on frame 7, the same frame, so we don't have to copy that later. Then we'll pull that in, and then let's copy that and hold it for a couple frames. Maybe we'll bring this to frame 8, just so that it's holding the trigger ever so slightly. And then the finger, we will curl inwards. So that was frame 8 for the final, frame 1 for the pull. Let's rotate all of those fingers in, maybe this tip a little bit more than the others. And we're going to hold that a couple frames, and then the finger releases. Now the final thing we can do to give it that extra oomph is to animate the camera. So on the first frame we're going to just have a little bit of rotation. Let's go to the x-axis and pitch downwards a little. And then we have the kick happening, where we're going to pitch upwards. And then recover. Back down, and then we'll copy this frame a little bit later. That's pretty good for the x-axis. Let's give it just a little bit of yaw. Nothing too crazy. We'll maybe bring that a little bit earlier. Yep, I'm liking that. And then finally the roll, which is going to be a lot of detail yet again. Roll is one of the axes that is okay to push to be a bit extreme, because it won't make people as motion sick as other axes. But obviously you don't want to overdo it because the edges of screen can come quite extreme. And make the x-axis a little bit less bouncy, I would say. Yeah, so it returns to idle much faster. Let's take a look at our final fire animation, which was done in not long at all. If we click on frame 0 while playing, we can pretend that we're firing the gun, and it feels pretty good. If you are animating for a game, I would probably skip this anticipation frame, just because you want the player to get instant feedback, so jumping straight from the idle to the recoil frame is probably a good bet for responsiveness. With frame snapping turned off, we can scrub through and see that it feels quite nice in between the frames. Taking a look in the viewport as well. That's feeling pretty good. And if you're finding that something is feeling a bit too strong, for example, maybe the Z translation is a bit intense for my liking, I can jump in and then scale this channel towards the idle pose, softening it down, just so it's a little bit more reeled in. We could do the same with all the channels if we want, just to soften down the whole animation, and get something that's fitting for a slightly weaker pistol. Just for fun, let's try doing it the other way and making it more intense. Now that is a punchy pistol. Hopefully now you can go off and work on your own pistol fire animations, and you can try applying things that you've learnt in this video to other weapons like rifles or snipers or anything you want. Happy animating!